For the first time ever, the NASCAR Cup Series and the IndyCar Series will race at the same track on the same weekend. And of course, it's happening at Indianapolis. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric and welcome to Out of the Groove. Hope your week is going well. We have a lot to talk about today before this weekend's events at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Going to be historic, going to be a fantastic 2 days of racing. But before I get too far into this episode, I want to mention that we have Out of the Groove t-shirts available down by the description or at teespring.com/stores/estep. We have several new designs available. Check that out. As fans are beginning to be allowed back into the stands at some upcoming races, be great to represent Out of the Groove on the go, so be sure to check that out. I also want to mention that last night on the weekly podcast, we had Mark Martin, NASCAR Hall of Famer, fan favorite. He was on the show on this channel, so if you missed it, the episode is still up. Mark Martin was kind enough to spend nearly the whole first hour with us. That was pretty crazy. We got to hear him tell a lot of interesting stories, a lot of really interesting and I've never before heard details. He really didn't hold back on a lot of the stuff he talked about, from his early days of racing to his later days of racing. Talked about his relationship with Roush, his relationship with Joey Logano, how he watched Joey Logano when he was just a kid winning races. A lot of really interesting stuff. So it was great to have Mark Martin on the channel, on the live stream. So go check that out. It's still up on my channel from last night. Go check it out if you missed it. Really was awesome to have Mark Martin spend that much time and be so generous with some of his answers and some of the things we talked about. It was really fantastic. I'm sure you'll all enjoy it. Anyway, we do have some news to talk about, but I also want to spend a good amount of this episode previewing this weekend's race at Indianapolis and talking about kind of the once-a-year question that always becomes asked, that always gets talked about. Question basically is, what is NASCAR's place at Indianapolis Motor Speedway? We'll talk about that, but before I get to talking about the racing this weekend and talking about all that, we've got some news to discuss. As a result of the worldwide pandemic, NASCAR was forced to basically shut down for about 2.5 months. No races. They've come back though in a big way with midweek races, double headers, no fans in the stands at most of these events, but NASCAR is on track to get all 36 Cup Series races in. But with all the wacky schedule changes, the countless weather delays, a lot of folks were asking the question, how is this going to affect TV ratings? Is this going to be bad for NASCAR in the long term, or is NASCAR withstanding this trouble, this issue, better than people expected? Well, now that Fox's half of the season is almost coming to a close, this weekend's race in Indianapolis will all be on NBC, but then the following weekend at Kentucky, FS1, and then the All-Star race will also be on FS1. So Fox is almost done with their half of the season, but not quite. But Fox earlier this week revealed how this year's NASCAR TV ratings compare to last year's TV ratings, and it's pretty darn close. Per Adam Stern from Sports Business Journal, the average viewership for this year is roughly 3.778 million people per race, which is down approximately 1% from 3.17 million at this point last year. So this year's ratings slightly down compared to last year, but this is despite the fact, and we talked about this earlier last week, that more than half of the 15 Cup races that have been run so far have been affected in some way by weather. They've been delayed, and in several cases have even been postponed, including, of course, the season opening Daytona 500, which was forced to be run, the majority of it at least was forced to be run on Monday afternoon as opposed to its scheduled Sunday time. And the Daytona 500 is always the biggest ratings getter all season long. It is always the most watched race of the NASCAR season. Having that race postponed a full day certainly hurt that viewership. So despite a lot of those setbacks, despite roughly 8-9 races that have been weather delayed, 3 races of the first 15 that have been full-on postponed a full day. Despite those setbacks, Fox says that their TV ratings are pretty much right on par with what last year's ratings were. Now, of course, last year's TV ratings are nothing to be super proud of. NASCAR has kind of bottomed out over the last several years as far as TV ratings are concerned. Fox's 2019 ratings were slightly better than their 2018 ratings, so many fans are hopeful, like myself, that NASCAR's kind of hit rock bottom and now things are starting to slowly traject upwards. The pandemic of this year has caused kind of a wrench to be thrown into that whole plan. What I think has saved NASCAR and Fox's TV ratings this year is the fact that NASCAR was able to be one of the first major sports back to live competition. Remember that first Darlington race back saw almost 6.5 million viewers. That's a pretty significant bump compared to what an average race that time of year, especially an average Darlington race, usually draws in. So they got a big boost there. Even this past weekend at Pocono with the first ever scheduled double header, the ratings on Sunday on cable were pretty darn good for a Pocono race. They might have benefited from the triple header of action all day. There was Trucks, Xfinity Cup, all FS1 all day Sunday, so maybe that helped boost it a little bit, but still not too shabby for a cable race, especially one at Pocono. The midweek races, now many of them have been delayed or even postponed by weather this year, but the midweek races in general, I would say, have not lived up to the expectations many people had for them, at least as far as TV ratings are considered. But the boost from several races, as well as the huge boost that the season opening Daytona 500 got on Sunday before the rain hit, was pretty significant. All those things considered are likely why this year's ratings are similar to last year's. That's all good news given how bad things could have gone. Keep in mind that Fox also aired several weeks of the iRacing Pro Invitational, and each of those races drew in roughly 1 million viewers. So you can almost look at that as free content, free numbers right there. So if you actually factor that in, Fox is doing pretty well this year, especially compared to last year. Myself, as well as a few fellow YouTubers, got to talk to NASCAR President Steve Phelps a couple weeks ago, and one thing he said during that conversation was that if there's one thing NASCAR has gotten good at over the years, is handling bad situations, because NASCAR's had a lot of crap thrown its way over the years, and so they've kind of learned how to make the most of imperfect situations, and I'd say they've done a very good job. Both NASCAR and Fox have handled the first half of this season, this tumultuous season. I think they've handled it about as well as you could hope for. So seeing those numbers made me feel pretty optimistic about the future of NASCAR, all things considered this year. Now, let's talk a little bit about Indianapolis this weekend. The Brickyard. The Brickyard 400 scheduled for Sunday. Big NBC. It's going to be the first broadcast of the year, first NASCAR broadcast of the year for the NBC team, which means Dale Jr. will be returning. Mike Tirico from Sunday Night Football fame, I think that's what he's most famous for. He's going to be a part of the broadcast team for both Saturday's IndyCar and Xfinity Series action and Sunday's Brickyard 400 action. So that's going to add an extra sense of prestige for the entire event, I would say, for the entire broadcast. This has always been a huge broadcast for NBC. The Brickyard 400 is a big ratings getter because people see Indianapolis Motor Speedway in the title and they tune in. Of course, this year they're running it on July 4th weekend, so even more hype and even more spectacle is likely behind this weekend's festivities. All things considered, this has the potential to be a huge weekend for NASCAR, for American motorsports in general, and also for NBC. The NTT IndyCar Series will race on Saturday afternoon on the road course configuration. This is not the Indianapolis 500. That's scheduled for August as of now. This is the Indy GP. And they're not the only ones running the road course at the Brickyard. The NASCAR Xfinity Series will also take on the road course for the first time in their history, which I must say, that's probably the race I'm most looking forward to all weekend long. You take all these young guys in the Xfinity Series and put them on a track that they have never seen before, they have never even sniffed before. Oh, you're just asking for chaos. It's going to be exciting if you ask me. Austin Cindric is the clear favorite in my opinion. He's won multiple road courses last year. He seems to be the road course king of the Xfinity Series. So I would keep an eye on Austin Cindric this weekend, but I'm not here to just make predictions. I'm here to talk about what other drivers are talking about, because remember that question I asked a few minutes ago? The question is basically, what does the Brickyard mean to NASCAR specifically, and what is NASCAR's place at the hallowed grounds of Indianapolis Motor Speedway? This is a question that's asked almost every year when NASCAR shows up to the Brickyard. Indianapolis Motor Speedway is arguably the most famous racetrack in the world. Definitely the most famous racetrack in the United States of America. It's of course famous for the Indianapolis 500, a race that annually brings in over 300,000 fans. No other sporting event in America comes close to matching that number. It's one of the most prestigious motorsports events in the entire world. And it's been going for more than a century. I don't know what year they're up to now. 103, 104? Is this year supposed to be the 104, 105th? It's over 100 years. That's all I know. They've passed the century mark as far as the Indianapolis 500 is concerned. That's historic. Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the Brickyard, the Yard of Bricks, all that stuff, it's known for IndyCar. It's known for open wheel racing in general. NASCAR didn't start racing at the Brickyard until the mid-1990s, less than 25 years ago. 26, actually. Jeff Gordon won in 1994. The Brickyard 400 has become one of NASCAR's crown jewel races. But while it's considered a crown jewel, the racing at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, as far as the on-track product, the entertainment value of said product, has varied to say the least. Of course, there have been some disastrous races at the Brickyard. Think of 2008, for example. Ooh. There have been some zany, just chaotic races. See 2017, that thing was a wreck fest down the stretch. I'd never seen anything like it. There's been some great surprise winners like Paul Menard in 2011, for example. But more often than not, the racing at Indianapolis Motor Speedway has not been too kind to stock cars. Most of the races are relatively forgettable. The cars get strung out way too easily. It's not typically thought of as a super exciting race. I went to the Brickyard 400 in 2007. I was like 9, 10 years old. Tony Stewart won. I remember that. That's about the only thing I remember from that race because it to this day, it was probably the least fun NASCAR race I've ever been to. It's hot. You can only see like the front stretch where I was sitting because I got that freaking crazy pagoda in the middle blocking everyone's view. I mean, it was cool. It was historic. As a 9-year-old, I didn't really think about all that stuff, but now thinking about it, it was cool, it was historic, but yeah, it was my least favorite race I've been to as a NASCAR fan. I've been to, I don't know, like 20 some races at this point. I don't even know. I've been to a lot of races. Not as many as some people, that's for sure, but point is, Indianapolis and NASCAR have not always seen eye to eye. Not always has produced the best racing. And that's why we have the Indianapolis road course being used for the Xfinity Series this year. And it's pretty clear that NASCAR in a lot of ways is testing whether or not the Cup Series could one day go to the road course. Because one thing NASCAR has said plenty of times in recent years is that they want to add more road courses to the schedule. They did that with the Charlotte Roval. They turned an oval into a road course because fans wanted more road courses. They have 3 on the Cup schedule now, and they've made it no secret that they're interested in potentially adding more in the future. They've mentioned street courses, for Pete's sake. So it's no coincidence that the Xfinity Series is running the Indianapolis road course configuration this year. It's clearly a test for potential expansion, you might say. A few drivers have sounded off in the past several days, talking about what the Brickyard 400 means, and in fact, in some cases, drivers were even asked whether or not they would like to see the Cup Series move to the road course configuration one of these years. Kevin Harvick said on Wednesday, "I would never vote for the Cup cars to not run the oval."
I would never vote for that because I love everything about the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, racing on the traditional racetrack, just because of the fact that for me, I'm kind of old school and I think that the Cup cars, belong and really started the Brickyard 400 and that was kind of what it was always meant to be was kind of that iconic one-off, just the Cup cars event. For me personally, I would never vote for the Cup cars to not run on the oval.
Kevin Harvick, of course, a very successful veteran, a past winner of the Brickyard 400, gives his thoughts there about the prestige that Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the oval or the rectangle, whatever you want to call it, what that configuration, what that version of the track means for motorsports in general. The oval is the most famous track in the United States. The road course exists, but when people think Indianapolis, they think rectangles. NASCAR is only running Indianapolis Motor Speedway. NASCAR only started running at Indianapolis Motor Speedway because they saw how popular the track was to IndyCar, how important it was to IndyCar, and that in general just made the track popular, important, spectacle, and NASCAR wanted a piece of that, and wanted a piece of that for themselves. Can't blame them. I mean, the place seats 250,000 people. At the time, NASCAR was drawing 250,000 people to races. I don't blame NASCAR for going to Indianapolis. I don't blame Indianapolis for inviting NASCAR in. Makes a lot of sense. Anyway, I also listened to part of Dale Jr.'s show this past week, and he also kind of shared his thoughts on Indianapolis, and he actually sounded a bit more open to the idea of the road course being used for the Cup Series.
I like the idea because the IndyCar Oval is, that belongs to IndyCar. That belongs to Open Wheel. That belongs to the legends of Foyt and Andretti. We are merely just guests. I'm okay with this, though. If we moved away from the oval and when Cup cars go to Indy, we run the road course, I'd be okay with that.
He points out what I just mentioned, that Indianapolis Motor Speedway is famous for IndyCar. NASCAR does not have a long-running history at the racetrack, and that's kind of his excuse for possibly toying with the idea of the road course being used going forward. He obviously knows, as we all know at this point, that the Xfinity Series racing at the road course is a test, is an experiment. And if it goes well, if it's entertaining, if fans love it, if fans fall for it, no doubt in my mind that we see the Cup cars on the road course here in the next couple of years, maybe as soon as next year. NASCAR has still not revealed the 2021 schedule and has not given a specific timetable as to when they will do that. But yeah, Dale Jr. is curious to see how the Xfinity race goes, as am I. Like I said, I think that's the most intriguing race of the weekend, not just because I think it's going to be a wild and chaotic show, but also because of the potential long-running implications if the race goes well. If the race goes terribly wrong, if the race is just bad, if it's single file, or if it's just there's too many wrecks, too many spins, yeah, we might be able to kiss the road course idea goodbye for the time being. But I have a feeling fans are going to like what they see. I have a feeling there's going to be a good mix of hard racing and chaos and wrecks, and I think fans are going to eat it up, in my opinion. It's going to be a nice change of pace from what Indianapolis typically shows NASCAR fans. But it is an interesting debate. I want to know what you guys think. Do you believe NASCAR should one day switch the Brickyard 400 onto the road course configuration? Do you think no, Cup Series should always race the oval? Or are you part of the group that thinks NASCAR should bail from Indianapolis Motor Speedway entirely? I'd be curious to know. Now, I used to be pretty down on Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Speedway. I can't say it's my favorite racetrack on the schedule. I just mentioned it's had some moments, but more often than not, Indianapolis has been a pretty forgettable race, in my opinion. Attendance has been struggling pretty heavily for a while now. Of course, this week there are no fans in the stands whatsoever, so that's not really going to come into play. But even the last several years, attendance for NASCAR at Indy has not been great. I'm the kind of guy who definitely values tradition. There are plenty of things in my life that I see as kind of traditional and I have a lot of respect for or nostalgia for. I just like things the way they are. But I'm also the kind of guy who doesn't believe things need to just stay the way they are purely for the sake of tradition. I don't think that's a good enough argument to make. Like, hey, we shouldn't change that. Why? Because tradition. Usually I feel like you need something more behind it besides just the tradition argument. So when it comes to possibly changing the Brickyard 400, which has again only been around for 26 years, I don't really think tradition is a super strong argument, kind of as like what Dale Earnhardt Jr. is hinting at. NASCAR doesn't have a strong history at the Brickyard 400. And yeah, it's been a quarter century. That's a substantial amount. People remember that Jeff Gordon win. That was a big deal at the time. But overall, I don't think NASCAR fans have a strong history built up with Indianapolis Motor Speedway. I don't think there's a very strong connection there. I mean, the attendance year to year kind of proves that. NASCAR fans have kind of bailed on Indianapolis Motor Speedway. It's clearly not to NASCAR fans what Daytona is, for example, or hell, even Bristol, the night race. I'd argue the Bristol night race should be a crown jewel over the Brickyard 400, to be quite honest with you, but that's kind of my point. I always root for what I think will make the racing, the product we see on the track, more entertaining to the broad fan base in general. I don't want to just satisfy this one small group here or there. I want to think what's going to be best for the fan base in general, which is a difficult thing to accomplish without doubt because everybody likes something a little bit different. But in my opinion, if the road course this weekend that the Xfinity Series race on, if that proves to be an entertaining race, I'm thinking like Roval levels of entertaining. Remember when the NASCAR first went to the Roval? It was a little chaotic, but it was fun to watch. If the Indianapolis road course configuration achieves that this weekend for the Xfinity Series, I can't say I'd be sad if they switched the Brickyard 400 to the road course from 2021 and beyond. Might sell a few extra tickets. It's going to be a different show, a different animal, a different obstacle for drivers to overcome, to learn and overcome, because nobody in the Cup Series or Xfinity Series has experience, especially not in stock cars at least, on the Indianapolis road course. Except Matt DiBenedetto, actually, because he tested it a few months ago in an Xfinity car. So Matt DiBenedetto got an unfair advantage. He's got a few extra laps. But that's my take on it. The Brickyard 400, of course, I do see it as a crown jewel because Indianapolis Motor Speedway is an iconic, historic venue. Not so much for NASCAR, but for the entire motorsports community, it certainly is. But I'm not so attached to it that I don't want them to ever make a change to it. If they believe the road course will produce a more entertaining and more unique race, I'm all for trying it out. Assuming the Xfinity race goes well this weekend. If it's a total crap show, if it's terrible, then no, I'll come back and revisit this and say, no, we should stick with the oval for the time being. But assuming the race is fun and entertaining, which I think it will be, I'm all for the Cup Series switching it up at some point in the next few years, but I'd be curious to know what you guys think down in the comments about Indianapolis Motor Speedway. There's going to be a lot of great racing action this weekend. I am extremely excited. Of course, I will have videos up this weekend reacting to the action we see this weekend. I'm not sure if I'm going to have a video up Saturday night reacting to the Xfinity Series. I will be watching the IndyCar Series as well. I don't watch every IndyCar race, but I will be watching this one without a doubt. I will certainly have a video up Sunday night after the Brickyard 400. Weather looks good. I probably just jinxed it, but weather looks good so far. So fingers crossed that race happens as scheduled. I can have a video up then. But yeah, between now and then, that's all I've got. Thank you all for watching this episode. I really appreciate the support. Subscribe if you are new. Follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Instagram. T-shirts, once again, I'll plug them one more time. Available down by the description or at teespring.com/stores/estep. Check it out. Represent the show wherever you may go. I appreciate y'all. Of course, a big thank you to my Patreon supporters as well. Your support means the world to me each and every single month, so thank you all a ton for continuing to support Out of the Groove and support the show. I'm hopefully going to get back out to the racetrack here pretty soon. I got plans to be at Bristol, maybe have some plans after that. I'll be filming videos, of course, showing you what it's like at a NASCAR race during a pandemic. So I appreciate the support. Without you guys, that would not be possible. Hope you enjoy the videos that are soon to come. But a crazy, crazy year. Once again, I'll also plug that Mark Martin, that interview, first hour of yesterday's live stream is still up on my channel. Go check that out. But yeah, crazy, crazy year. Things are only going to get crazier. This weekend's going to be crazy, but it's also going to be historic, and it's going to be great for hopefully a lot of good reasons. But thank you all for watching. I will see you again this weekend. Have a great rest of your week.